Hello, sweet viewers. Annyeong. That means hi in Korean. I'm Christine from Kimbap TV, empowering you to live a happier and safer life, especially if you're a fellow domestic violence survivor. In today's video, I want to talk about my experience with rebuilding trust as a domestic violence survivor. When someone I loved and trusted violated me in every way imaginable, I didn't know if I could ever trust anyone again, especially a guy. I remember when I first got back home to LA and started going to this church, the worship leader was an Asian guy, and so was the teaching pastor. I remember looking up at them and thinking, I bet you beat your wives at home too. That's how twisted my thinking was back then. Seeing any Asian guy triggered me. A certain type of haircut, brands he used to wear, even a familiar vocal tone. They all had me doing a double take and creating the worst possible narrative for that person. Needless to say, it took a long time for me to trust men again, but I did, and now I'm happily married to an Asian guy. I'll share with you some ways I overcame my fearful and negative thoughts and allowed myself to fall in love again. Let's get started. A few months after I escaped my domestic violence abuser, I started going back to church regularly and met with a group of young adults around my age. The good thing about this type of gathering was that we broke off into smaller groups of about a handful of people each. There, I was able to do some Bible study and share my life with these people. During this time, I was still pretty broken, both physically and emotionally. Some days I went without having showered in days. I wore my baggiest clothes with my greasy hair and didn't care what anyone thought. Other days, I looked totally fine until I just randomly started crying or laughing or both. But my group knew a little bit about my domestic violence past and helped me to feel safe and accepted no matter what kind of day I was having. One of the guys in my group was a shy and quiet Japanese American guy named Matt, who I came to call Matty. My first thought about Matty was that since he was coming to this group every Friday night, he either really loved God or he just didn't have any friends. After a handful of months of being in this small group together, I felt comfortable enough to be his friend outside of church. We had already established a very strong foundation based on God. Maddie and I started going out to eat once a week, and I learned that his parents lived down the street and that his closest friends were from kindergarten and middle school. It was really nice to know that there were a lot of people who were local who could always tell me about Maddie should I have any questions in the future. My ex had very few friends I knew of, and it was difficult for me to know who he was from others' perspectives. I realized this was actually a very important part for me to truly get to know somebody. I could always paint myself in the best light, but talking with friends from my childhood as well as my family will help you to see so many more details of who I am. Another thing I noticed about Maddie was that he drove and still drives a really old car. He has a great job and can afford to pick really any vehicle he wants, but throughout the months and years that I've come to know him, I've learned that he doesn't want to spend a lot of money on himself. Instead, he'd rather spend that money to sponsor kids through a nonprofit, or most recently, set aside a monthly expense to randomly bless others. I come from a proud Korean immigrant family where luxury cars are greatly desired. While I still think they're beautiful, Maddie helped me to gain a different perspective on life. His pride didn't determine what he drove, his heart did. His super old car was actually his grandma's, and it holds a lot of sentimental value. Maddie is also quite practical, and he helped me to understand that life is more than what you showcase for others to see. During our time together, I chose to trade in my BMW for a more fuel-efficient plug-in hybrid. The transition was not easy for me. I actually cried that day because a part of me really wanted a prettier car that was more of a gas guzzler, but I knew that was not a practical choice, especially in LA traffic, driving about 50 miles round trip per day at the time. The last things I'll share with you about Maddie that helped me to trust again are his patience and unconditional love. He is about the most patient person I have ever seen, and his childhood friends can attest to this too. Seeing him showing so much grace to both myself and to others who wrong him from time to time has been refreshing, because I've gotten used to getting yelled at or being called horrible names by my abuser when he got upset. I think Maddie's patience is rubbing off on me too, because I find myself a lot nicer to bad drivers or rude people at the grocery store. As for unconditional love, I remember we had a conversation while we were dating about certain things that could happen in the future. What if my mom, who is alone, gets sick? He said he would take care of her. What if we have kids who have special needs? He would love them just the same. What if I can't have kids? Then we would adopt, and he says he'll love them just the same. I know these are the right answers to these questions, but saying them and living them out are totally different things, right? My abusive ex used his words to lure me in, but in the end, his actions too often contradicted his promises. So the only way I could truly test Maddie was to see his actions over time. And sure enough, watching how he lives, how he cares for others, and how he loves me and those who are important to me confirmed that he will 100% stand by those words he spoke while we were dating 5 years ago. So I hope this helps. As a domestic violence survivor, I have so many emotional scars that still haven't healed yet, and it's been years. But with the right person, I'm learning to live with those scars and to embrace my broken self. Having a partner like Maddie who is willing to wholeheartedly love me just the way I am allowed me to trust and wholeheartedly love again in return. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who also needs to hear this. And please remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me today. I appreciate you and look forward to seeing you again in my next video. Bye.